I wanted to touch upon the process of grieving. How do we grieve the death of a loved one? How do we grieve the loss of someone who we thought or we acted as if they will never move away from us? It's extremely hard, isn't it? I mean, even if you are not in this position, you've never been in this position, you can imagine how hard it would be to simply process and accept the death of a loved one, someone who you used to live with daily. It's hard. It's extremely hard. So the process of grieving is especially hard for people who are extremely close to the one who has died. And I think one of the main pieces of advice I would give to anyone would be to be yourself, to not think too much about how you should be acting, how other people would be thinking about how you're acting, and how you would ever get over this grief. Rather than that, you should be in the moment and simply do what feels to be the most natural thing right now. For some of us, it could be sitting in silence. You need to sit in silence then. For some of us, it could be writing it out, penning it out in a diary. That's what your thing should be. For some of us, it could be talking to a friend, talking to someone else in the family. For someone, it could be simply crying out. And all of those things, all of these different manifestations of grieving are valid. So you need not be ashamed of what your thing is, how you are processing the emotion. You need to be you. You need to be yourself. And that is one of the biggest advices I think I can give out when it comes to grieving for a loved one. Be yourself. Do what you need to do in the moment to process the emotion. But having said that, I also want to touch briefly upon what you should not be doing. What should be the don'ts around the process of grieving. And for that matter, the first don't should be to not distract yourself away from the emotion. And I'm saying that as the first don't because this is almost a piece of advice that was coming at me left, right and center from a lot of different people. Distract yourself. Keep yourself busy in other things. Do this, do that, focus on this work. It'll take your mind off of your father, etc. And as someone who considers himself to be a very self-aware person, I knew that if I was to push this emotion aside, if I was to push the emotion of how sad I was, how demolished I was because of my father passing away, if I was to push this emotion away, it will come back. It will come back in some other way. It's almost like that cartoon back in my childhood days, Tom and Jerry, where Tom would smash the head of that dog with a bat, and there would be this what do you call it? It'll be some sort of a wound would raise on the dog's head, and Tom, to pretend that nothing has happened, would press it down and it'll come up on the other side, and then he would press here and it'll come here, etc., etc. You get what I'm trying to say, right? If you suppress your emotions, they do not stay suppressed for long. They come up in one form or the other. And therefore, the first don't that I would advise you if you're grieving for a loved one is to grieve for your loved one. Don't distract yourself away from the emotion. Even if it feels like that is the right thing to do, that is the easy thing to do, don't do that. At least don't do that all the time. Process the emotion. Take your time processing the emotion using all the different techniques that I mentioned previously. And this is so important. The next don't that I would want to talk about is don't worry too much about explaining to others how you are feeling. This is such an important realization that I had over this entire past month that I faced, that no matter how good you are with words, no matter how intelligent you are with words, no matter how good you are at reading other people, you still cannot understand the exact emotion that other person is feeling, or let go of that other person. Even if you are the one who's feeling this deep, inconsolable grief within you, there is no word that you can come up with that will do justice to the feeling that you have. And that is something that is so profound, I would say, because like I've always said on this channel too, reality is always beyond words. We try to cook up all of these different words and try to make sense of entire life in terms of these words. But when it boils down to the real nitty-gritties of life, all of reality is always beyond words. Everything, every word is always going to be limited by the image that you have in your mind, limited by the image that someone else has in their mind, etc. So the long and short of it is, the second don't that I would give you if you're grieving for a loved one is to not worry too much about explaining to someone else what you are feeling deep within you. Because even if someone is good at understanding others, if they are not in this situation, it's very hard for them to even contemplate properly the degree of the emotion that you are feeling at the moment. So don't worry too much about it. And yes, I think that's about it. Letting things flow, not forcing too much. Similar to what we talked about initially, it could happen that, like I said, I was getting this advice from a lot of different people that distract yourself away and do this, do that, etc. And for me personally, I think I was able to process all of it by processing all of it, by not forcing things too much, by not forcing myself to move on too much, by not forcing my family members to move on so much, by simply being in the moment. And by being in the moment would not mean that you're always crying. I know for a fact that over the last month or so, I have had some moments where I've sobbed inconsolably. But there have also been moments when I've laughed out loud like a madman. And that's supposed to happen too. I'm not ashamed of that. You have to be yourself. You have to let things be as they are without forcing things to be according to the image that you have in your mind. I hope that helps.